Okay, welcome to Pool School, sponsored by Memphis Pool. It's our pleasure to do this. We've done this for a number of years and we get a great deal of pleasure out of doing it. And there are a lot of pool owners, current and past, that have gotten a lot out of it. And we work hard towards showing you what to do and how to operate and how to avoid the mishaps of the pool ownership. Just like in a car, changing the oil, looking at the tire pressure and things like that, it's more of a preventive type thing as you go along. And I will tell you this is not meant to be, it will not be technical. It's, some people would say it's Pool 101. I would more or less say it's maybe Pool 91 or maybe 89. We do not get technical, we just want you to understand the basics of things. So if you're a technical hotshot out there, some of the things we say in this or subsequent sessions may not be technically or scientifically correct, but nevertheless they're meant to make a point without confusing and leaving somebody. We're not here to impress anybody, we just want to cover the bare basics. And the first thing we'll do is just talk about the pool operation itself, and we'll just hone in on the pool and we'll leave the other things, the filter, pump, and sanitation and that sort of thing. That will come up in a subsequent session or two. But today we're just going to talk about basically the pool. The pool you see, people say you have a pool, you walk out in the yard and say, oh, there's the pool. Well, this is what we have. And to make it very simple, what we have here is a bird's eye view of the pool. Now, the pools can take on, obviously there's an infinite number of shapes and sizes and volumes and all that. There are no two pools that are exactly alike. However, I will tell you this, that they all operate the same. All pools will have a skimmer or something that functions as a skimmer. If you get into huge commercial pools, you don't see skimmer lids, but you see gutters, troughs around it, but nevertheless they function as a skimmer. Another thing, and the numbers of skimmers and location of the skimmers will depend on the surface area and the volume of the pool, and the placement mainly has to do with where they'll do the most good. For example, you wouldn't likely find a skimmer tucked out like that on one long side. It'll be more or less in a corner, or if it's got a radius in there, so and to work with the prevailing winds to channel little floating stuff, whether it be little pieces of bugs or pine needles or body oil and all that will be blown and work towards that. That's where the water leaves the pool, one of the places. The other thing that you'll always see will be the main drain, and there's a covering on that. And some of you have main drains. You say, well, I have two main drains. Now, well, you really have one main drain, but you have two outlets. If you had two, underneath there's a pipe that ties them together, and then that pipe is tied. Those pipes are connected by one pipe that go all the way back to the filter and pump. We're not getting into the movement of the water today or what does all that and how that works. We're just getting into what you have and what you see here and what it does. Now, once the water leaves the pool through the skimmer and the main drain outlet or outlets, it goes to the pump filter and it's pushed through and sanitized and cleaned, and then it comes back to the pool and it comes through what we call a return, and the return fitting is on there, and you've looked at them before, and they have, and the numbers of returns again has to do with the size and the shape and the configuration of the pool, that they'll be strategically placed so that they move the water and keeps a good mix. It wouldn't make sense to, if you have 4 returns, to put them all down on one end or in one location. You scatter them, but all this is done by the pool builder. It has to do with the design, the layout, and the configuration to make it work best for that size and shape pool. Now, the skimmer is really one of your best friends, and it's often overlooked and just seen as, oh, that's where stuff collects and this and that. But let me tell you something about the skimmer. The skimmer will help you. Let's just talk about the skimmer, look at it. There'll be different sizes and shapes of skimmer lids. Most of them that you'll find will be round. There are square ones. Some manufacturers do a square, but they do square and round. But nevertheless, the shape of the lid has nothing to do with it. That basically has to do with just the covering. And let's take a look. This is the skimmer right here. This is what you're seeing is the top, and that's this. And then what we're going to take a look at now in understanding this, let's take this bird's eye view and then let's just make a big section all the way down through the pool, and let's lift this part out and then you stand here and we're going to look at this wall of water. Now, I will say that we've had to hurry because of some situations, national situations. We've had to hurry and just put some things together because our normal run-of-the-mill, not run, but our normal PowerPoint wouldn't work, picking up by the camera and filming and that sort of thing. So we had to do some just hand drawing, get a couple things printed and done. So just bear with us while we go through this. It's not a very clean look in some instances, but nevertheless it's accurate and does the job that it's meant to do. Okay, so now we've cut down through the middle of it, and now here's a hand-done drawing. I did this so you'd see it, and I don't do artwork, but for enough money, yeah, you could cover a commission and I'd do something for you. Okay, so down on the end there, this was the end that had the skimmer, and there's the lid. And so we've taken a section through it, and here's the slice through the water, so to speak. And there's the drain cover that we saw, and then there's the little return that brings the water back. Now, the skimmer has got some it's the only one that has some moving parts, and it does most of the work for you. The rest has to do with circulation, but this has to do with actually cleaning the pool. Now, a lot of the stuff that gets in the pool actually floats. You have body oil, sunscreen, cosmetics, pollen, little pieces of leaves, twigs, bugs, and this kind of thing. And their surface tension holds them up there, and if your skimmers are working and balanced along with the hydraulics of the rest of the pool, you're pulling a lot of water off the top. That's where all the dirt and the mess is on top, and you're pulling that off and takes care of it. Now, if you don't service the skimmers and keep them emptied on a fairly regular basis, then the skimmers fail to move as much water, and anything that you don't take out through the skimmer is going to fall to the bottom, and you got to deal with it then. So they just keep the skimmer doing what it's supposed to be doing. So let's talk about it. Here's a little guy. I hope you can read that. That's the weir. That's a little flapper thing, and it's inside this. This is the view inside of the skimmer. You don't see all this because it's covered with concrete and underground and that sort of thing. But in the skimmer, this one, like I show up here, has got this little flapper looking thing that does that. And the way that guy works, if I reached in here and plucked it out, this is what you'd see. It's down in there. We call this a hinged weir. And in this instance, it's hinged on a little pin here and here. And if you'll look at these, you'll see that this thing has got a certain thickness to it, and it's either filled with air, styrofoam, or something that will actually cause it to float. So this would be with the pump and everything off, no movement of the water, it's going to assume a vertical position. Now, once you start pulling water through the skimmer with the pump, before it goes into the filter, the water is going to ripple across the top, and it's going to bring anything that floats in there with it. Pollen grains, pieces of leaves, insects, things of that sort. And certain times of year, there are a lot of things. I mean, a lot of things that will fill this thing up in a hurry, depending on the vegetation around. And some of you have certain trees that have these little pollen cone-looking things, little small things, and you know what I'm talking about because you get big wads of those out of your skimmer, look like a cannonball. You get those out on a pretty regular basis. So the more water you're pulling from the skimmer, the more force there is in pushing this. The flow pushes this back further. And now, more is not necessarily better. You just have to adjust it. You'll look and see that you get a good healthy ripple across there, maybe an 1/8 of an inch or something like that. I've been to places before where you take the lid off and you look in the skimmer and it looks like Niagara Falls. Yeah, they're moving a lot of water, but they're not really doing the skimming. The skimming action is lost through the ultimate big flow and the gallons and everything they move, and they are moving a lot. Now, some of you may not have the little skimmer weir, but you have one that sort of floats up and down, and this is called a floating weir. And I don't know if you can see it, but you can see this has a cylinder outside, and there's an internal cylinder that sticks down about 3 inches or so, and inside the space between them, as you drop it down in the basket there, it captures air and it floats. That's why they call it a floating weir. Now, as you have the skimmer pulling and working, you see the same movement across here, and you'll see a little bit of movement as that water flows across here. And there's nothing wrong with these, because to tell you the truth, you look at the full circumference of this is going to be a little bit longer than that weir there, so you have plenty of skimmer area there. And regardless of what you have, you'll always have a basket down in the bottom, whether you have a hinged weir, floating weir, or whatever. Now, from time to time, let's talk about the skimmer for a moment here and the maintenance of it. From time to time, you'll have to empty it, get the stuff out, because this is, if it's left alone, the stuff will collect and collect and collect and collect, and you'll have so much stuff in here, you're cutting down on the flow of water, and sooner or later the pump pulling can crack the skimmer basket and do some damage. But the main thing is, you need to keep it emptied, and I don't mean you need to go out there every 30 minutes or hour, but just don't let it collect a lot, and you'll know something sooner or later about the characteristics of that particular pool, how often the skimmers need a little attention, and what time of the year you need more than others. And you don't want to go in there and what you'll do, and what I like to do, I'm our pool guy at home, and I've got a chlorine bucket that I've kept, and I'll go in here and I'll take the leaves, the stuff that floats and sticks and twigs and things like that, and I'm sure you've done this, or you will be doing the same thing too, and you'll get everything out you can. But sooner or later, after you've gotten the large bulky items out, and those you can pick up with your hand, there's still a lot of stuff floating around in there that really needs to come out, because if you don't, and you just grab this basket and pull it up and dump it in that bucket to get rid of it, a lot of this stuff went over the side and went down here into the bottom of the skimmer, and it travels through the pipe back to the pump basket, and you've got 1, 2, 3, or 4 of these, or maybe 5, and you're feeding those, all the stuff that bypasses this goes into a pump basket that's this big around that and that tall. So consequently, you're creating more work for yourself down the road, and we'll cover some of the parts of that when we do the pump in a subsequent session. Now, the best thing to do and this is what you paid your admission for today. This is worth coming to the show in itself. Now, once you get everything out that you can with your hands, you've done it, then what you need is one of these little Skimmer Dip Nets. And these things have a very, very fine mesh, and believe me, you can just about get pollen grains, and you can clean and get the rest of the stuff out of there. So once you get the little small floaty stuff, then it's safe to go ahead and lift this up and then dump it into the bucket or whatever you've got there to collect it, and then put it back in. And then if you've got a floating weir, obviously you don't have to do anything to it, because it's going to attain its position. Or don't forget to put the the hinged weir will attain the position that it has within the pool. And then the floating weir, if you got a floating weir, you're not going to have both, you're just going to have one or the other. But like I said, these little guys, and you can get these at any of our retail locations. We have one on Get Well. We're about 4 or 5 blocks south of 240. Been there since '72, and we've got a place in Germantown. We've got one in Collierville. And our newest one is also in Collierville, Outdoor Living, where we have a lot of grills and spas and other things as well. Some of you have been down there and looked through there. So once we get this done, you put it back together and you're in good shape. Now, one question we get a lot of times is, where should the water be in the pool? Well, look, if the water level is too low, this guy here is going to flop back and go down, and you're going to cause a whirlpool and suck air and lose the prime on your pump, and there are a lot of problems connected with that. We'll talk about that at the same time we talk about the pump operation, pump and filter operation at a subsequent session. So, and if you got it too high, then what happens is it's up here, so you don't have any skimming. Now, you are pulling water, but you're not pulling all the water off that the skimmer moves off the top. You're not skimming. You're moving water, but you're not skimming. And that's what the skimmer is supposed to do. So, a rule of thumb, just a rule of thumb, and I know there'll always be some hotshot pool guy that's got a degree with MIT, and he's going to tell you, oh, it needs this and blah, blah, blah. But if you ask 3 pool builders or 5 pool builders the same question, you're going to get 7 different answers. As a rule of thumb, Just consider this as the opening to the skimmer. Let's say you're standing right here and you're looking back at the skimmer and you've got this rectangular opening. As a rule of thumb, you need the water to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1/3 to 1/2 the way up the skimmer. If you get it too low, again, the weir will go back or be sucked down and you'll suck air. And if you get it too high, then you're going to be in a situation where you're not doing any skimming, but you are still moving a lot of water through it. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, the skimmer is really your best friend in terms of maintenance if you just take care of it and look in on it and pay attention. And these little skimmer dip nets I've found to be very lucky, because particularly in certain times of year, you pull this up and there's a lot of leaves and branches and things. You can kind of, after a big windstorm, you can kind of poke first and see if anything moves. And if something moves, obviously you need to, don't just plunge your hand down and start grabbing, you just kind of proceed with caution. That'll come at a later session. We have those in the emergency room over at the med, if you're interested in that. All right, so that'll take care of us on the skimmer there. And if you have any questions, you'll be able to do a question and answer. So you'll be able to pose these in our on our site, and we will get back with you on those. Now, okay, here's the other outlet. This is the main drain, and you have covers on those because that outlet is a very, very, very can be a very dangerous place. And these grates come in different shapes. They come in different sizes. That's a round one. Here's a round one. Here's another round one. And here's a square one. Square if you're from East Tennessee. But anyway, these are, I can't overemphasize the importance of keeping the covers on there and having them fastened properly. There have been the grains have been broken, the grates have been removed or something like that. Different things have happened. And there have actually been entrapments and sucking and holding people down. And there have been drains, drownings. There have been, I mean, it's been a horrible thing. A few years ago, a granddaughter of a former Secretary of State, James Baker, was at a pool, and it had an outlet on the side, which is, you'll see that's not really uncommon. And she was underwater there. The little girl had long hair, and she got over there, and the hair was being pulled through the little openings in the grate, and she went to pull back, and she couldn't do it, and the hair knotted up and held her, and this little girl drowned, and it was very tragic. It was awful. The only positive thing of that was she had a name that was noticeable, and as a result, the CDC got kicked into, I mean, there was a big flap over this. The industry worked with the CDC and some other safety industries, and they passed a law, they passed a law called the Virginia Graham Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act. And these drain covers now need to comply with certain engineering aspects, and you may have ones that, oh, I got it covered and it's okay, but it may not be in compliance with VGB. Now, if you are a residential pool owner, you don't come under this law. This is for cities, YMCAs, municipalities, motels, apartment buildings, and things like that. But the point is, the best thing I would recommend that you do is make sure that yours are not broken, not damaged, and screwed down with the right fasteners. But at the first opportunity you would have somebody to investigate, look at those, and make sure they're VGB compliant. And if they're not, then you need to have VGB compliant put in there, because if somebody was hurt, damaged, drowned, or something, whereas you would not be legally responsible, I think there'd be some moral implications in that you knew that you should have done something. I can't emphasize that enough to make sure that you're in compliance there. Okay, well, that takes care of the water that leaves the pool. We've talked about the skimmer. We've covered the main drain. And if you have any questions regarding those, on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, you can ask a question or want a clarification or needing something, and we'll get back with you on that. We'll do that. Now we've taken the water away from the pool through the skimmer. and the main drain. And then for our purposes of discussion here today, remember this is just the pool school 81, 91, whatever we came up with. I don't know, math confuses me anyway, but we're just talking about what you see when you walk up out there. The other stuff will come later in the next, in another session. We're going to cover everything. All right, so the water left. Now here it comes back in through the return. You remember we had that label return a while ago. And again, the numbers of returns will depend on the perimeter of the pool, the volume, the turnover, the usage. If it's a spa, you have certain turnovers. If it's a municipal pool, you have certain turnovers. A residential pool, there's no real hard and fast law, but although there are some recommendations that they should follow for proper health and disinfection purposes. And this is basically what a return looks like. You don't see all this other stuff. All you really see, if you're looking down in there, you see a fitting with a hole in it. We refer to that as an eyeball because it'll rotate around. In this particular fitting I have here, you can see there are 4 holes here. Well, this is made for a vinyl liner pool, and this little flange would squeeze together on the liner with some gaskets and stainless fasteners and hold all that together. If it's just a concrete gunite type pool, all you really see is a little plastic flange and the eyeball fitted in there. But they do turn them in certain directions to get the maximum, the movement to finesse the water some way or another for turnover, for distribution, for skimming action, of various and sundry things like that. So you don't have to do any maintenance or anything to that. You just don't go messing around with it and unscrew something one day and boy, you feel this big water gushing out there and you say, oh, Phil, that's fine. Yeah, we got lots of water. Because if you take this out, you're throwing out tons of water here, but you don't have the back pressure to push it to the other fittings around the pool to get proper distribution. You're still moving a lot of water, but you don't have it in the same place, so you don't have the water that's as sanitary. You don't get good turnover, disinfection. You can have algae and things like that. I hope this has been some help to you. And like I said, we always get a lot of good comments about it, and we're ready to answer questions that you may have. Just go to our YouTube channel or our Facebook page and tell us what you got, what's on your mind, and what we can do to help you and what you answer your question, and we'll get back with you in that. Maybe not within the next 15 minutes, but you'll get an answer. And again, thank you for patronizing and taking some interest in this. Memphis Pool's been around for a long time. It was founded by a man that was a retired captain from the Army from World War II. By the way, he served under General Patton, real interesting chap, and I enjoyed knowing him. And anyway, I had the opportunity to really get to know him and worked with him a number of years. And we are a locally owned company, employ local people. The money that you spend with us goes into local paychecks and doesn't go off into a corporate account anywhere. We're all locally owned and have never been anything other locally owned, but we've really grown over the years, and it's with the patronage of the people down in the southeastern U.S. We do a lot of commercial work all over the country. Well, yeah, and lots of places other than just Memphis. Anyway, thank you for your interest, and we'll see you next time.